is long-suffering. The willingness to be wrong. Are you better than Jesus? Do you have a right to seek your own vengeance? Avenge the wrong done to you? No. Jesus had the right, and he gave it up. If we're to reveal Jesus to each other, in our relationships to one another, if we're to be different than everybody else, we have to act as Jesus did, and if we regard ourselves as having the right, we have to give it up. And that separates us from everybody else. If there's one thing that we'll know us by, it's our love one for another. And to the extent that we have not been long-suffering enough, we need to ask forgiveness from the Lord and from one another. Our tolerance, our pain tolerance, our threshold. My threshold just with drivers who are confident that my brakes work. You know, that's a rebellious attitude. And it's just a little enough thing. It's why I have to allot an hour and a half to make a 35-minute trip. But what's that to me? I should hate somebody I don't even know because they're doing what they normally do, which is not pay attention to anybody else. We're supposed to be different than that. How we relate to one another is going to set us apart. It is either going to be our glory or it is going to be our condemnation. Wow, I had a whole different thing going all night, and this isn't it. But
keep going, you're all right.
This isn't where it was supposed to be going.
It's all right. You're doing all right. Keep right on going.
If we can have the testimony in Scripture of the kind of sacrifices and endurances that Paul went through for the church of Corinth, and like I said and read back in Philippians chapter 4, verse 12, I think it was, I've learned how to be abased and how to be abound, without the B. I've learned how to be abased and how to abound. I'm going. Paraphrase, we're just going to let that lay. Too much caffeine. So, it's very short and concise in the Philippians because that's all they needed. The Corinthians were rebellious. They were prideful. They were immature. That's the charge against those who cannot learn patience and long-suffering and can't learn it and reveal the same thing that Jesus could reveal in it, which is it gives joy to those that are your brethren, those that you interact with. It fulfills, it fills up what is lacking in them. And in so doing, it sets joy before you. It actually changes your countenance. And it all comes back down to that little glimmer about the relation that I had with the Lord was that I have charged you, he said, with setting your affections on things that are above, and you have no affection for anything. And until you can get some affection to set on things that are above, you'll have no affection for any of the things that are mine. Inside the camp or outside the camp. And you have to learn how to love one another, to reveal Jesus to one another, and to reveal it to those, to show it to those, to show yourself different, to show that you have something that others might want. Otherwise, what are you but just another clanging cymbal or noise out there in the loudness and confusion of the world? So my charge and gosh, there's 25 dozen fingers pointing back at me. The charge to me, the charge to all of us is, don't be so quick to try to avenge wrong done to you, because long-suffering has been grace to you, and mercy to you. Give it back. Fill up that account of grace, because you're going to need it. If you're anything like me, you're going to need it. If you think you need it, I need it 100 times more. I can't. That's all I got. I was working a crowd when it was only me. I don't know, I was really good.
Thank you, Paul. All right, thank you, Paul. Let's see if I can add a little more wood on that fire. Let's turn to Matthew chapter 6.
Just read this morning.
While everybody's turning, I'd like to encourage y'all, and I know I've mentioned it before, but let me say this. The Spirit of God is not subject to time or space. And the Spirit of God can move and will move as He sees fit, through whom He sees fit to move through. And it's encouraging to me, because oftentimes we look out and we see, I personally get discouraged when I look at the state of the church, or I look at the state of things around me. And I wonder, does anybody else see it? Does anybody else get it? Is anybody else hearing the alarm that the time is now, the time is near? And I personally struggle with wanting to keep going and wanting to put one foot in front of the other. And that's really sad, because I've been doing it for such a short period of time compared to some people like my dad, who is much like the Apostle Paul and has suffered wrong his entire life. And yet still intercedes on behalf of even those that have wronged him. But I know that the Spirit of God is without time and without limit, and He can use who He wants to use. And I must confess that I have an aversion in myself when I hear of other ministries doing something, because I've seen it done poorly so often. And when I hear of stuff like movies, Christian movies, I remember the old Christian movies that were really awful. Really awful. And I watched another one last night, and I have to say, I should maybe know better, but I go into those things and I'm thinking, oh, we got it on Netflix, let's get it over with and get it back, so we can get the next thing. And it was a movie called Flywheel, and there's a bunch of movies this one church has really been putting out. The first one was Flywheel, and they come on the very beginning and say, look, this was our first one. We've gotten better. But this is, the Lord put it on our heart to do it, and I hope you all enjoy it. And I got to tell you, they've done 3 movies. They've done Flywheel, Fireproof, and Facing the Giants. And granted, the acting, there's sincerity there. I'm going to leave it there. It's kind of like they got a great personality, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's far better than I'm sure I could do, but they're reading lines, okay? But the substance of what they're talking about has moved me every time. And last night I was watching this movie, and it didn't take long to get moved yet again. And what was so amazing to me is that the same message, the same scriptures, the same principles that we've been hammering over the last year were literally verbatim